morning. So today we have Brandon with us who has over a decade of experience in the IT field, and he considers himself a transformational leadership. He is responsible for strategy, defining deliverables, and creating the organizational structure which eventually leads the organization to success. He has taken multiple roles in different organizations, and he has led a lot of organizations to success. Let's welcome Brandon on 10 Minutes of Hiring Wisdom, who will enlighten us with his wisdom and will share with us about different hiring tips and how to get you that dream job that you've always wanted. Hi, Brandon. How are you doing today?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I am doing well. Thank you so much for joining us, Brandon. So, can you tell us about where you're currently working, what your position is with that company currently?
So I work for a company called Red 8. We are a IT consulting services company that also has a lot of relationships with multiple OEMs as far as providing product and things like that. I function as the field CTO for Red 8, which is a role I had previously at Dell. I came from Dell, where I ran all of the field CTOs and enterprise architects globally for their commercial pre-sales organization before I moved over here. And I'm basically doing the same thing. I'm running all of the pre-sales engineering resources at Red 8 and developing the go-to-market strategies and then training up my guys to help deliver that and bring that forth to our customers.
Okay. And because it's a field position and everything, do you think the pandemic definitely affected the way your company operates? How has the pandemic changed the way your company deals with these things?
Categorically, it's changed how we operate. You have it's kind of interesting. So there's a potentially long conversation on this, but the short version of it is you took a field based sales organization and fundamentally removed the field from them, and the learning curve there was very, very steep for a lot of folks. There are certain people who were more introverted that maybe it became a little bit more naturally to, and then there were others who were much more extroverted that really struggled and required a lot more support and a lot more of coaching and how to be successful in the environment. So it had a huge impact. Not even looking at the business side and how we did, I think it was a down year for everyone. But at the end of the day, even through those shifts, we're really happy with where we ended up and where we landed at the end of the year. But it was a big hurdle for everybody to climb.
I definitely agree, and I think as in it pushed companies to get out of their comfort zone, especially the employees. So I can understand how different people reacted to the situation differently. But I mean, I think at the end of the day, considering your company did well and is doing well, is something that's very important because some businesses weren't so lucky and they were eventually shut down. So thank you for sharing that. So as in your company specifically, IT, as in it's growing and everything, but it's a very some companies, they have a very niche talent that they look for. So, according to you, because you've had such a great experience and everything, according to you, what are some of the reasons why some companies, especially tech companies, lose out on great talent? What do you think would be some of the possible reasons?
So, wow, it's a really great question. The thing that I've kind of seen from experience in tech companies is they don't do enough leadership training. The individuals that tend to lead engineering teams, more often than not, not every place is the same, but what I've seen more frequently than not is they hire from within, and that's good, but then they don't necessarily really impart a lot of the leadership skills and do some dedicated training for first time and second tier managers. And I see a lot of engineering leaders having to rely on leadership coming from outside of their dedicated organization. So, for example, having been on the sales side in IT for so long, a lot of engineering teams relied on the sales team's leadership to manage the engineering resources from a sales perspective. And while that's good, the needs and motivators for engineers are not the same as they are for sales folks. And oftentimes that would end up being misaligned. Uh, I think that had a pretty distinct impact. Of course, IT as a whole is a very volatile industry. You look at Silicon Valley, and developers will go from house A to house B over an extra $10,000 of free coffee, right? That can be kind of hard to deal with unless you do a really good job. And this is one of the things that I think is super critical for leaders in IT, particularly in engineering as a whole, is the type of culture that you inculcate within your organization. Do engineers want to be there? Do they feel empowered to stretch their engineering capabilities? Do they feel empowered to come up and look at and create new solutions, or be able to tinker with things technically, which at the end of the day kind of points back to why so many people in technology got into technology in the first place. They were tinkerers by default. And if you can't help them, continue to grow and continue to develop that, it can become very stagnant. And my experience has been that that tends to be one of the primary drivers when you take money off the table. That becomes one of the primary drivers for why people either stay or leave, or in many cases follow good leaders from company to company.
That's a wonderful insight, especially because I think the purpose and the way it like just helps in navigating employees through their day-to-day activities is so important. And especially if you realize you're a part of a company and you're not learning, you're not growing, eventually, yes, money would be something that you take into consideration, but then eventually you're just like, okay, I mean, I might as well go somewhere where I can constantly learn. And with companies like this, with especially because IT is growing so much, you are likely to get a better offer. So companies need to realize that at the end of the day, they're fighting for candidates rather than candidates are actually looking for companies themselves. So thank you for sharing that. So Brandon, can you
Yeah,
tell us
let me
about?
throw out one point because I think it's
Go ahead.
interesting to there's a parallel to your first question around the pandemic. And the reason why I think the culture becomes so important, because one of the biggest things that the pandemic opened up, I think, across all jobs now, is that fundamental change around where people sit from a work perspective. And what I think a lot of people have to start realizing is, for many companies, you're not competing just because the job might say, you know, come be an engineer here and we're in Houston or Dallas or Denver or LA or whatever. You may not be competing to be the best engineer in Dallas or Denver or LA. You might be competing to be the best engineer who applied for that job across the entire country.
That's very true. That's a wonderful way to put it. So, Brandon, can you tell us about whether you're hiring? What kind of, as in, like you mentioned that you have a certain criteria based on what you judge and everything. So, can you tell us whether you're hiring, what roles are open, if candidates are interested, and based on like what criteria would you judge them?
So our position's a little bit unique in the industry in the sense that we're still privately held. That part's not unique. But one of the things that I see that is unique in our space is I see a lot of resellers and consulting companies look at expansion by city. Do they think, pick your metropolis, do they think that's the next big expansion area? Do they think that there's a ton of business and the market is underpenetrated there? We don't necessarily take that approach. So right now, do I have any posted recs for me personally? I do not. Our company does. We have, we're looking for engineers to do a number of different things. My team specifically right now, based on our headcount requirements, is full. But what we do as a company as a whole, and why we always talk to everybody, is we don't look at the market as how we expand. We look at the people. And if we have a rock star candidate or a rock star individual who is in Springfield, Missouri, and they're the right person that fits our company, that has all the capabilities we want, we'll look at bringing them on board and figure out how do we expand into Springfield in Missouri in a good way around that candidate. So we're not necessarily always out there going, "Oh, I got to expand into Dallas." I don't have anybody in Dallas, for example, right now. That's not a priority for us. But we are looking at a candidate actually in Springfield, Missouri, that we would then potentially build a team around to grow into that market space because they're the right person. Um, so that's kind of how we grow. So it's the only time we really open up Rex right now is not because we're targeting a place, but because we found the right person to start with. As far as for my team and my organization, from the pre-sales engineering and architectural perspective, I do. I actually there are four key attributes that I always look for and have developed a scoring mechanism around uh, that I use during my interviews. I don't necessarily get really deep into do they know every technology out there, because I think saying that you're really great at Dell or HPE or Hitachi or something isn't necessarily as valuable today. So I look at what is a candidate's capability around how do they establish, set, and achieve goals. I look at their ability to very quickly develop good, positive relationships with both the internal organization as well as our customer base, and how they tie that into their ability to achieve goals. I look at and attempt to assess how, I don't want to call it a cognitive ability, but a individual's ability to think very deeply about specific topics. So I'll often ask about a completely esoteric subject, or ask a question about a subject that I know that the person knows very, very little about. And I look for how deeply do they think about it? Are they able to start hypothesizing about root cause? Can they start hypothesizing about short, medium, and long term ramifications of whatever this particular topic might be? Um, and then lastly, and I think this is a very underserved aspect of a lot of engineers, because a lot of engineers, this is a little bit of an anathema to them. Being an engineer, you think you have to design out every potential risk. And I'm actually looking for people who have the ability to judge and make a calculated risk. And what I mean by that is, can you sit down with a customer, hear a customer's business problem, understand what they're trying to achieve from a business perspective, and say, you know what? I think if we put these 4 or 5 products or tools together, they have the right capacity and they have the right functions to achieve your business end. But I don't know if anybody's ever done it. And are you willing to sit down and go try it? Let's go see if we can make that work. That's one that to me really distinguishes people that are decent and good at the job from those that are great at the job. And then the only other thing that I probably look at, and it's a very basic question, is do they fundamentally understand that good consummate engineers do not solve technology problems? They solve people and process problems with technology. And
Okay.
it's a subtle distinction, but it's one that makes the difference between, are you building something for your customer's business, or are you just, somebody who knows how to read a configuration file and say, oh, I can replicate that with another thing.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
those are the things that I look for.
Those were really useful, especially because I think the approach that you take, it's very holistic, where you look at a combination of soft skills and a combination of hard skills based on which you actually assess the candidate. So it's very important, and I think it's very useful because usually we look at one aspect of the whole interview process, and we're just like, okay, I did poorly in this. But even if we like make sure that we can actually consider all the 4 aspects, they could be quite useful for candidates, specifically if they are interested in applying to your company, for instance. So, Brandon, thank you so much. It was a pleasure learning from you about your experiences, about your like insights, and specifically about the key matrix that you measure candidates against, especially when they're applying to your job. Our time is up, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
I appreciate it. Thank you. You too.
Thank you.